I gotta get mine. Yeah, you gotta get yours. I gotta get mine. And a house. You gotta get yours. I gotta get mine. 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 Get yours. Hey, you as smooth as I wanna be. Fuck with me, you's a goner. Oh, that's the way it is. Fuck yeah, and that's the way it's gonna be. Why? Puffing up on the dank and drinking mad brew.
Aram on Everything podcast. We are back. Had a good earlier podcast this week with Mike Machete. I suggest you all listen to it. And now we're expecting to have an even better one with Scott Wolf today, as we do what really seems like the only thing possible that we can do right now, and that's look back. We're going to do exactly that with the 2006 National Championship game, Rose Bowl, between Texas and USC. Should have some interesting perspectives from you there, since both Scott and I covered the game and we were there in person. Plus, we will discuss an amazing time in USC football. Could be none other than the Ting Brothers era. The Ting Brothers era. Get some good thoughts from Scott on that. So stand by. Bumping out of my trunk, little life of a hustler, high till I die. Meeting bitches, getting bitches, miss me with lies. Picture me living out my life as a buster. I'd rather pop up a shot for my Glock and blast motherfuckers. I live a thug life, baby, I'm hopeless. Choking off window, trying to keep my... Got my mind on my money and money on my mind. Finger on the trigger, hand on my nine. You like that, huh? A little MC Breed, Tupac to start the show. This is the Aram on Everything podcast with Scott Wolf. We are the number one podcast in Orange County, and that's because this is the podcast that cuts through all the bullshit. We're going to do that today in a big way. No fanboys, no fangirls allowed, as usual. Like I said at the top, good topic here. Last week, ESPN threw on the replay of that 2006 Rose Bowl heartbreaking loss for USC in the national title game to Vince Young in Texas. Scott was tweeting about it at the time, so was I. But there's a lot more to say about that game. And we're going to do that today. Plus, we're going to talk, like I said, about the Ting Brothers era at USC. Unreal stuff. We hope everybody's holding up pretty well right now with this whole COVID-19 tragedy. Like I said in the podcast earlier this week with Mike Machete, which I suggest you guys go find on YouTube. It was very good. We are not trying to downplay the seriousness of the situation. There are people dying. There are people very sick. There are families in a lot of distress. There's people losing money, losing jobs. We're not trying to downplay any of that, just trying to entertain you during a very difficult time. We know we're all sort of quarantined right now, so you should have some time on your hands, and we will help you pass that time. And what better way to do that than by bringing in the Wolf of Figueroa Street, Scott Wolf. I ask my question that I ask when Scott's on the show at this time, every time. Scott Wolf, are you there?
I am here.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Good to hear your voice. How are you holding up, given the circumstances, sir?
Surviving, I guess, is the best way to put it. Like everybody else, I'm trying to stay home as much as possible and not go crazy and just kind of occupy myself and... waiting it out, just waiting, hoping for the best.
Well, a good way for people to do that, kind of wait it out, occupy themselves, is by visiting your website, Scott, which they can find at insideusc.blog. Don't think that because things are slow that Scott isn't working it. You'll find lots to read. Interesting stuff there if you just go on there. Like I said, that's at insideusc.blog. You can also follow Scott on Twitter at InsideUSC. At InsideUSC on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter
at Chemical AT. The warning goes out. There is a lot of political stuff being tweeted there, so if you can't handle it, I totally understand. I'm not biting my tongue over this coronavirus situation and whatnot, so again, just be forewarned. Nonetheless, okay, Scott, let's get into this.
Apparently, I'm the only one who's writing that Sultan McCullough was in a serious car crash over the weekend too. So
yeah,
I don't know. It hasn't been picked up by the media, but I've had a huge number of hits on my blog over the weekend because people really wanted to know how he was doing and what happened, and it just seems like no one else has decided to write about it, even in these slow times, sports news-wise.
Well, there's a reason for that, Scott. The people that currently hold down beats, USC beats, at least if we're talking about local newspapers, probably have no clue who the guy is. That, or they're on furlough because, sadly, right now, our former employer and the LA Times and other publications, they're really going to have a rough time with this, with the economy shutting down, and it's costing people some work time, and there's furloughs going on. So the reporting, might be more hit and miss than usual. But like Scott said, Sultan McCullough, for the people local that know me, he's a former Mirror High School running back here in Pasadena that played at USC, injured in a car accident over the weekend. Scott, I'll let you take it from there and update everybody or update them on his condition and let them kind of know what happened.
Well, he was in a serious accident in Monrovia. I posted a picture of his Mustang. I guess he was street racing, and he hit another car that was coming the other direction, and his Mustang basically broke into two pieces, and thankfully he survived, and he was in intensive care. I heard yesterday he was moved out of intensive care, that he's responsive, breathing on his own, but he's under medication, and they're giving him medication so he can sleep. He has a broken shoulder. It sounds like he had a finger amputated, although I'm not 100% sure of that. And yes. The big issue, from what I hear, is it's still too soon to know if he's going to be able to walk or not. So obviously, there's a lot of concern from his family and friends and ex-teammates. And I mean, I've heard, people like Reggie Bush and Pete Carroll and other people have been reaching out, trying to find out information, and a lot of his teammates from when he played at SC have been calling each other, trying to just figure out what's going on because they're all concerned. So, you and I have both heard stuff on how he's doing, so I'll just keep posting stuff as I get updates on his condition.
Yeah, thanks for that. The McCullough family's pretty big time here in Pasadena. Saladin McCullough, that would be Sultan's younger brother, was a star running back at Mirror High School, also played at Oregon, real stud, and sadly he lost his daughter recently, I want to say in the last year or two, to a car accident of all things, and now to have this happen as well. Two really tough blows for a great family. Scott, I'm pretty connected to the Pasadena community and the Mirror community specifically, and I've been getting updates too. And I'll tell you, I not to diminish the situation or the predicament that he's in or what lies ahead for Sultan McCullough, but to see that car, the pictures, like you said that you've posted of that car, and just that he survived is a minor miracle in itself. So we hope he gets out of there without much further damage. And I think, Scott, he was an assistant coach at Arcadia in recent years. Don't quote me on that. But I think so. Or maybe somewhere around the area. So anyways, when it rains, it pours. All right, so let's get into this. Scott, I want to have a candid talk with you. I want to have this thing flow. There's a lot, even, what's it been, 14 years later, that I want to get off my chest about this 2006 Rose Bowl between USC and Texas. It all bubbles to the surface whenever the replay is shown. It was brilliant of ESPN to show it last week. At a time when people are just really starved for sports, and all we can do right now out of safety, and it's smart, is just look back and enjoy old games, old replays. So let's get right into this. This game played 2006, January 4th at the Rose Bowl. Scott, you may not know this, but I was there too. Obviously, you were the USC beat guy for the LA Daily News and all the papers. But I was there too.
Great. We had great communication in those days that I didn't even know you were at the game. Huh?
In the same press box as you, sir.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. When you told me you were there, I was thinking back, wondering if we were even sitting in the same area. But I don't think we were, because I think I would have remembered. So I've forgotten a lot of things from back then, but I think I'd remember if I was sitting near you, probably because I wouldn't have much room for myself to sit there in the press box. But
sure, right. Actually, I was slimmer back then, believe it or not. I was there with Kevin Chavez, who at the time was the columnist. I want to just say, general sports columnist for the Pasadena Star-News, San Gabriel Valley Tribune, Whittier Daily News. I don't think he was for the whole group. So I think
the Tacolita expert.
Tacolita expert. Yeah, he's since retired from sports writing. A very smart move. Went into the private sector, and now he's probably much better off financially than us. But anyways, he's still a big sports guy.
I heard your podcast with him a while back on Tacolita, where I put it in, but very interesting podcast. I enjoyed listening to him talk about that.
But this was back in an era when, we're all under the same newspaper group umbrella and there's like 10 of us there, totally unnecessary. You wonder why the newspaper business model doesn't survive. Nonetheless, Scott, I think you were there probably writing the game story for the group. Would that be correct?
Yes, and probably some notes or notebook.
Okay. I was there writing a sidebar on the game, an accoutrement to your game story, even though you didn't know that we were there. So let's just break this down, Scott. What I remember, obviously, is this game was on its own pedestal. I want to say it was a Monday night. Does that sound right to you?
I think you're right there.
Yeah. I want to say it was on a Monday night. Obviously, it's January 4th, so all the bowl games have been played. And as a gambling man, your boy is ending 6 or 7 teasers, not parlays, but teasers, to USC, pulled down from like a 6 or 7 point favorite to around a pick'em range, something like that. And I'm confident that I'm going to hit these because I don't think, this Texas team can beat USC. I not that I thought USC was great, Scott, but I thought Texas entering the game was very, very overrated. I know they had gone undefeated. I didn't think their conference was much. I want to say that was the year they pulled a game at Ohio State out of their ass. Yeah, it was. Ohio State completely dominated the game, and much like what happened to USC, it was week 2 of the season back on September 10th. Vince Young pulled a comeback out of his ass, and Texas won 25-22 in a game they didn't deserve to win, and they whipped up on a shitty Big 12. So going in, Scott, did you think SC had this thing in the bag?
Well, I don't know if I thought they had it in the bag, but, they'd won, I think, was it 33 straight games going into that game?
Right.
33 or 34. So I think everybody just kind of thought, well, they're going to win, just like they always do. And, the thing was, it didn't feel, I don't know about the players completely on this, but it wasn't like a big deal that they were playing in the national championship game because they had just won the year before. And then the game at the Rose Bowl, they're practicing at USC. Like, they're not going anywhere special to have practice. So this was just like a normal occurrence for them. You know, Texas hadn't played in the championship game, so you had to think this was all helping USC, and playing at the Rose Bowl is going to help them. And, you know, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And you look at the superstars that got all the hype at USC, and, you know, they won that big game against Notre Dame. So you had to think, you know, SC was going to, one way or another, they're going to win that game.
Okay. Here's my problem, okay? I didn't like that SC team. Even though I had my bets to them, I was just anti-Texas entering the game. But my problem with SC was I thought they had no defense that year, and they really didn't against good teams. And it goes back to that Fresno State game that won Reggie Bush the Heisman, where they won 50-42. Fresno State, you know, a good Fresno State team, was getting what they wanted on SC's defense. And that concerned me. And it felt like the beginning of this era where, in order to be, you know, a successful football team, you didn't really have to play defense anymore. You just had to be able to outscore the opponent. And when you have Leinart, Bush, Lindale White, Jarrett, you know, those types of guys, those kinds of weapons, Dominic Byrd, you know, you can outscore the other team. They just can't keeping up with you. And I thought that that's what would happen here. Texas, you know, hasn't seen a quarterback like Leinart, and they hadn't. But leading up to the game, ESPN is running these things in the week leading up to the game. Chris Fowler is at the Coliseum. I remember it, and they're filming these things at night in the Coliseum. He's, you know, standing in the front of it with the, you know, the architecture and all that stuff. And it is basically asking, is USC the best team of all time? And I'm just dying laughing to myself, because I would think that defense would be a requisite if you are going to be considered among the best teams of all time. So this team had reached that level, like you said, because of all the wins. They had won the national title the year before with a team that could play defense, right? And, you know, here we were. But when you start seeing this best team of all time stuff, as a gambler, I start to worry. It throws up red flags, like, hey, you know, hang on a second here. And it actually motivated Texas, if you've seen the documentaries about the games since. You know, this juggernaut, this hype that USC was receiving going into the game.
Well, you know, the one thing that raised some red flags for me was before even the Fresno State game was they went to Arizona State, and with 6 minutes to go in that game, they're losing 28-24.
Right.
And at the time, everybody, I think that was a USC fan, was like, wow, you know, we didn't expect this. And Reggie Bush had like a 34-yard touchdown run with like 3:44 left, and then Lindale White had a 46-yard touchdown run with like 2 minutes left. So they ended up winning by 10 points, but they easily could have lost that game. And, you know, I think to me that was a big, I know they barely beaten Notre Dame, but Notre Dame was a pretty legit team. But, you know, they're almost losing to Arizona State. But I want to go back, and I want to mention another story, because we're trying not to talk about, like, specific plays.
No, we are, and we're going to, so feel free.
One of the things, though, that I remember is in mid-December, I went to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, and, you know, USC was just so dominant in those days. You know, they had Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart at the ceremony, and Matt Leinart had just won the year before, and back then there was a guy who did, like, the Heisman projection before the ceremony, and he would, like, poll voters, which they don't allow anymore. So everybody knew, if you went on the internet at all, you knew Reggie Bush was going to win the Heisman Trophy, because the guy had all the projections and everything. So he wins, just like expected, and then afterwards they bring the people in for a press conference, and Vince Young finished second. So he comes into the press conference. It was at the Hard Rock Cafe in New York. Mm-hmm. I still remember this. And he's furious. He's angry as he's talking to us. Mm-hmm. And he actually thought he was going to win the Heisman Trophy. Wow. And I don't know why he thought that, because all he had to do was go on the internet, and he would have seen he wasn't going to win the trophy. But,
right.
They've since talked about it, how he used that as a motivation for the game itself. But, I went to 3 or 4 Heisman ceremonies back then when USC was winning a lot of them, and never saw an upset guy after the ceremony. I remember the best one was the year before. Jason White from Oklahoma was there. Adrian Peterson from Oklahoma. Leinert was there, who won. Alex Smith from Utah was there. And those guys, the guys that lost, they were all in a good mood afterwards. And this was a highlight of covering the Heisman for me. That night, Leinert won. A couple of us got to go to this trendy club in Manhattan where ESPN and the Heisman took the guys that were in the final there. So it was, Jason White went back to his hotel. He didn't want to go, but we were there, and Leinert was there. I think Reggie Bush was there, too. And Alex Smith, Adrian Peterson, Kirk Herbstreit was there. So Alex Smith, we were all talking a lot that night. It was pretty cool. It was a good experience, and you got to actually have conversations with these guys where, they had their guard down, and they were just kind of talking how they feel about things, and very down-to-earth conversations, and with a lot of loud music and a lot of young women, of course. But so nobody was upset. But the next year, boy, Vince Young was on fire, and he had been so mad. They had the ceremony in a building next to the Hard Rock, so he actually walked across the street, I think, and into the Hard Rock, and he waited, I think, for Reggie Bush to talk. And then he came up, and he was still mad. I mean, he was probably mad for about 30, 40 minutes before he spoke to the media. And nobody expected that. We were all shocked. And, I've seen him do interviews since then talking about how much that fueled him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've seen that too. You see, this is the kind of stuff that I want to get out of this game. Things that people maybe don't know, unique perspective that hasn't been already put out there, which is hard, I understand, because, this is a classic game, and it's been 14 years, and there's been a couple documentaries already done on it, maybe more, and a lot of the stuff is out there, but I still think there's some things that need to be brought up that hopefully some of which we can hit on today. That would be one of them. So let's get into the game, Scott. It's first half. Reggie Bush, I think, catches a pass, or he's on a run, and I've had to go back and look at this play. I remember, not recently, but in previous times in years, in the past several years when I've seen the replay of this game, just to confirm to myself that this thing actually happened, that this white guy, who I don't know his name to this day, maybe you do, he's trailing Reggie Bush on the play. He must be like a backup tight end or a fullback, and Reggie Bush inexplicably decides to pitch the ball to him. The Heisman Trophy winner decides to inexplicably pitch the ball. Now, I know Reggie Bush never liked contact, and he was approaching defenders, and he was about to get tackled, but I still cannot believe what the fuck he was thinking at that to pitch the ball to this guy. And like I said, I've had to rewind the play just to make sure that this white kid, I still don't know his name, maybe you do, didn't just pop up out of the grass, because I'd never seen him on the field before that, and I'd never seen him since. Do you know who that guy was, Scott?
Of course I do.
Okay. The ball's fumbled. The guy obviously doesn't handle it. He's as stunned as anybody in the stadium that Reggie Bush options to him. And Texas recovers and scoring opportunities thwarted. That's when I knew my bet's history. When shit like that happens, you're done. It's like SC's fucking around and you're done. So who was this guy, Scott, and what are your takes on that play?
Well, I think one of the things that makes this such a great game for everybody is there's about 5 plays that everybody remembers as huge turning points in the game. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy to kind of keep the game fresh in your memory. And this obviously was one of the biggest, if not the biggest. Reggie Bush is, running down the field on a big play. And I watched this last week because I have to watch that play just to make sure I can, want to see if I can understand what's going on. But for some reason, he's about to get tackled. He decides he's going to pitch the ball to Brad Walker, who's a walk-on wide receiver.
Oh, my God.
Who basically would come into the game just to block. And, the pitch was behind Brad Walker. So
yes.
It was I don't even know if Dwayne Jarrett or Steve Smith was there, they would have gotten it. But the thing is, I don't know why would you pitch to Brad Walker? Steve
Why
Smith
is Brad Walker even on the fucking field in a national title game?
Well, he was a blocking guy, but
Ah.
Steve Smith, I think, or Dwayne Jarrett might have expected a pitch because, they are on the field every play with Reggie. They've talked about it in the past. I don't know how much Reggie Bush ever talked to Brad Walker, and I don't think Reggie Bush, he was just trying to do too much, but, I don't think he can fully explain why he did that. But you can definitely point to that play as, one of the turning points of the game, because SC had all the momentum at that point in the game. So,
I just...
Nobody's really explained that I've seen, a good explanation of what happened there. And Reggie Bush certainly hasn't. And, a lot of people forget this, and I don't even know if ESPN showed it last week. But the other big turning point early in the game to me was I think USC had like a 4th and 1 early in the game, a 4th and 2. And Matt Leinart tried a quarterback sneak, and Texas stopped them. And I don't think USC was used to that happening very often during the season. Pete Carroll loved to go for it on 4th down. Mm-hmm. And that turned out, you think about it now, having that field goal would have made all the difference in the world. But I don't know if you noticed this at the Rose Bowl. The thing I noticed in the first half was, number one, Texas's defensive linemen did not look like defensive linemen USC would have faced during the season in the Pac-10 or even with Notre Dame.
Right.
And number two, the safeties from Texas were the best I'd seen, in a long time. And I think is it Michael Smith, if I remember? He made the interception of Leinart in the end zone in the first half.
Right.
And that was an incredible play.
Yeah,
and
as he's going out of bounds. He kind of cuts off the pass as he's headed the opposite direction going out of bounds.
And I remember at halftime talking to some guys in the press box and telling them nobody's done that to Matt Leinart before like that. The way that guy came over that play, I mean, that was a whole different ball of wax we're talking about. And yet, here's the thing. All of that's true, but it's also true USC was up like 12 points in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
So
yes.
For everything I say about Texas, USC still had a comfortable lead in the game and should have won the game.
So it was like when USC settled in, started taking it serious, which kind of felt like kind of after halftime. Leinart could not miss in the second half. Texas couldn't stop USC one bit. it was just like you started to see SC kind of the cream rising to the top. Even though they were having some troubles on defense, cream rising to the top, and it's just one of these things that every time SC's getting the ball, Texas can't stop them, and that's just going to have to be the way things are. But then comes a problem where USC now needs to win this game as we start getting further into the second half or into the fourth quarter, like you said, when they're up 12. Now it becomes about winning the game with your defense. And the circumstances of the game just made that so. Scott, I believe with 4 minutes or 6 minutes left, they allow the media to come down from the press box. Is that right? Do I have it right? Is it 4 or 6?
Yeah, it's about, I was going to say around 6 minutes.
Okay. I've been waiting for that moment the whole game, okay? I want to go down on the field and cover it from there. So we finally get that moment during a TV timeout. Me and Kevin leave the press box. We start heading down. We take the long walk down, get to the field. We have our passes, step onto the field, and that's the Texas sideline on the press box side. And immediately, there's Matthew McConaughey, there's Bevo, there's, all these, former players, celebs. The fucking sideline is packed. You can't see a thing. Okay? And that, for me, I want to say, was when Texas had the ball down 12 and they had that first score to get within 5. That's when I get down to the field. I was blown away. This wasn't my first Rose Bowl to attend, but it was my first Rose Bowl, I think, to cover, if I'm not mistaken, as a sports writer. I'm pretty sure about that. I could not believe the loudness of the Texas crowd when anything would happen. It was nuts. I mean, it bothered your ears nuts. What are your thoughts? When did you go down to the field, or are you just such a chiseled pro at this time that you're going to take it in the whole way in the press box?
Well, what's funny? I have zero memories of deadline on that night. So I think normally I might have decided, I'm going to stay in the press box and write my story, because we usually had to send something, right when the game would end or whatever.
Sure.
But I didn't, maybe I had said to hell with it, but I don't know, maybe I'd already sent my story, but I went down on the field around the 6 minute mark too, with a friend of mine, and we went on the SC sideline just because, I cover USC, so I want to be on the SC sideline,
right,
to make sure if anything happens, I see it on the SC sideline.
Sure.
But we went down on the side. We were down where Texas scored their touchdown, but we were on the other side, on the SC side of the field.
Okay.
So we got a perfect view of the play and everything. But yeah, when we got down there, it was loud, and you could just feel how nervous everybody was watching the plays. I remember that SC possession right before where Linda White got stopped on fourth down.
Right. We'll get to that.
The thing I remember going down there was Matt Leinart tried to throw a little pass to Brandon Hancock, and it was short. He was getting rushed, and then Hancock couldn't catch it. But
another guy, I have no idea why he's on the field. Another guy. I mean, okay, enough.
Well, that
okay.
was back in the days when they used to throw to the fullback. But
okay, so let's just rewind back. We hit the field. SC's up 12. Texas has the ball. Texas goes in to score and make it a 5-point game. I'm standing on the Texas sideline because that's just where the tunnel, not the tunnel, but the walkway led out onto the field. I'm standing there, and it is so crowded down there. You're talking about the 5-10 yard line, goal line, that kind of thing. It's so crowded with people down there, you can't see what's going on, even me. And I'm a tall guy. All I see is over the people. I can't see what's happening, but I see this white helmet go across everyone's heads. And I know that's Vince Young, coming to the front corner of the end zone to score a touchdown. That's all I see. It's at this time that my whole beef with the game, that the whole tell on the game begins. On that drive, you have the Ting brothers, 38 and 39, on the field. Which, if you want to win a national championship, under no circumstances can players of this talent level be on the field. And I'm just going to leave it at that. People can draw their own conclusions as to what I mean from that point forward. What were their names? Brandon and Ryan Ting?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Brandon and Ryan Ting. One of the guys has an interception in his hands and chooses to knock the ball down rather than intercept it. The situation's way too big for him. I don't remember which one that was. The other one tries to cock tackle Vince Young, meaning he goes flying in cock level and completely whiffs, and Vince Young just goes right by him. And I think he either scored or got a first down on that thing. This is like, I can't even explain to you. At this big time of a moment, there is no way guys like the Tings, forget about Hancock, forget about Walker, the guys that we talked about that were on the field for other plays, there's no way you're going to stop in this situation, in this setting, Vince Young, with guys like Ryan and Brandon Ting on the field. Your thoughts, Scott?
Well,
why are they on the field? Were they even starters, Scott?
I don't think they were starters, but...
So they were in for the packages.
You know, they were probably in when they go 6 defensive backs.
Right.
Or
they were in for the packages. Right. Okay, yeah. So they were in for the packages.
But you got to understand, too, the reason they were even at USC, their father, Arthur Ting, is a surgeon, and Pete Carroll knew him because he was a team doctor for the 49ers.
Right.
And Pete Carroll coached with the 49ers. So they had this.
Right.
He had 2 sons, and they wanted to play football. I think they were looking at Stanford. But so Pete Carroll decided to take them. And I don't think anyone really thought much of it because they just figured, you know, they'll just be on the roster. And I think he even told me, like, they're just going to fill out the roster.
Thank you.
But
yeah.
They ended up having bigger roles. And the funny part was once they got on the team, players, when they would suffer knee injuries, and would end up going to their dad and have the surgery instead of the USC team doctors.
Is this not USC in a nutshell? Is this not USC nepotism in a nutshell?
Well, it was kind of it was a two-way street in a way, because they started going to see the father for the knee operations, and then, also, you know, the players didn't really think a lot of some of the team doctors at the time, so it wasn't a terrible idea, but it caused some friction. And when Pete Carroll was there, you know, they had a lot of winning, and it was fun, but he always had a little bit of chaos going around him too. As
right.
I'm sure later you'll bring up the Tings again. But
yes, we'll focus on them specifically in just a second and how that whole Ting era ended. So I'm still on the Texas sideline. SC, the lead's now cut to 5. SC gets the ball back. They drive to a certain point. Here comes the big 4th and 1 play. I can't see it, Scott, but all I know is the setting is 4th and 1, and if they get it, they're going to win the game. I don't see the play again because I can't see a fucking thing. All I know as to what happened is the Texas crowd on that sideline erupted, and it was like being like next to a jet engine, and their sideline went nuts. And it's at that point that they knew they were going to win the game. They just got the ball back. They knew, I think everyone in the stadium knew, SC's not stopping Vince Young going down the field. So I think after it's ruled that Texas gets the ball, I think they go to a TV timeout. because at that point I say I've got to get to a place on the field where I can see the game. So I walk. I leave I'm going to walk over to the SC sideline, and I'm going to go the long route, like heading toward, north into the Arroyo Seco rather than south. So I walk to the north side of the stadium, around to the SC sideline, and when I get to the SC sideline, Will Harris, who I covered in high school, he's now a defensive backs coach at Washington. I hear someone say, "Hey, man," to me like that, and I turn around, and Will Harris, I think he's a redshirt freshman at the time. He's not suited up. He's standing on the bench with injured players and other redshirt guys and backups that are never going to see the field. They're standing on the bench so they can see the game. He says, "Hey, man." So I walk over and I slap fives with him, and he's standing next to Desmond Reed, who I also covered in high school, who sees me and, same thing. "Hey, man," so we slap fives. And I continue down the SC sideline, and again, that's just again the same thing. I can't see anything, Scott. I don't know how you. I know I saw Sean Salisbury and Marcus Allen standing there talking to each other, along with the ESPN guys like Herb Street and Fowler and all them down there. But I can't see anything, and again, it's the same thing but opposite side of the field. All I see is this white helmet when Vince Young scores the winning touchdown go across the top of people, and I know what happens. I don't know about you, where you were, what you saw on the historic touchdown.
I think, I don't know exactly. I think we were around the 5 or 10 yard line on the SC side, but we were like right in the front row there. So we actually had good views. I mean, when Lendale White got stopped, we saw the play. We just didn't know if he got in the first down or not because we're down on the field and angle. But obviously the Texas reaction, we knew it looked like he didn't make it. And we were shocked at that too. But I remember telling my friend at the time, and not many people agree with me on this. Even now on Twitter, but I remember telling my friend right there, like, they should have punted the ball because, make Vince Young go 85 yards in however much time was left, 2 minutes or whatever. Mm-hmm. So then, it's a little tougher. And I know Pete Carroll said afterwards that they couldn't stop Vince Young, so that's why he went for it. But at the time, I thought I would have kicked the ball just because let's see if he can go, 80 yards in that amount of time. And I think they had one timeout maybe. But
Scott,
so Pete Carroll, the point was Pete Carroll had zero confidence in the defense at that point to stop Vince Young. So he felt he had to put it all on the line.
I'm watching the game. Okay, I'm watching the game the other night, and and it's at this very moment in the game, and I'm no mind reader or lip reader, but it seemed to me like as far as play calling goes, Pete Carroll had nothing to do with it. As far as deciding to go, it looked to me like Pete Carroll goes up to Sarkisian and says, "We're going for it," and then just basically lets him call a play at that point. Was Sarkisian the offensive coordinator at the time? Or was
No, Lane Kiffin was the offensive
Kiffin was.
coordinator.
Okay.
But
maybe it was Kiffin that he went up to and said that to. He says something to him and walks away, Pete Carroll. It seemed to me, again, I'm just grasping here, I'm just reaching, that he's telling them we're going for it, and he's going to let them decide what play call they want to use. Scott, I've said this many times. When you're going to grab your balls, you use both hands, okay? You do not run off tackle. You just don't do this. And I'm not going to second guess, well, Bush should have been on the field or it should have been White or whoever it should have been. All I'm going to tell you is, and I've said this steadfast since, I got home from the game and watched the replay and was able to process things, because you can't process them on the field when you can't see things. You can't process them in the press box when you're looking around, feeling out of place in a press box that you're not used to. But you can when you're alone in your bedroom and you're watching it. If All they needed to do right there was go play action. And Matt Leinart is going to have his choice of 1 or 2 or 3 receivers that are going to be absolutely fucking wide open, and it's going to be a touchdown. Just as simple as him getting the ball to them catching it, and running the rest of the way. That's it. If you go back to the Holy Buckeye game with Ohio State and Purdue, with Ohio State's season on the line in 2002, it's the same situation. 4th and 1, just inside the other guy's territory. Time's running out in the game. In fact, Ohio State's down at that point. They're down in the game at that point. They're down 6-3. They decide to go play action. They throw a bomb to Michael Jenkins. He catches it. They win the game. They go on to go to the national title game undefeated, win the national title. If you're going to grab your balls, you use both hands. That is what Pete Carroll did wrong. I guess, I don't know. Maybe he could have overheard. Maybe he shouldn't have let Kiffin or Sarkisian pick the play. Maybe he could have overridden it when he heard what it was. Maybe he's just not that kind of coach. Maybe he's going to live and die with what his assistants say. But somebody there needed to call something other than the play that they called.
Well, just a couple things. One, he goes for it on 4th down. He does, that's just his style, and that was his nickname. And the band used to chant this. You might have heard it at the
Big
Little
Balls
Bowl.
Pete or something.
Yeah, Big Balls Pete. But that was just his thing. He liked going for it. So the other thing, though, is Lane Kiffin's in the press box calling the play, but Sarkisian is on the field, and they're working together. They're talking to each other because they were really close. So they would kind of agree on stuff or, bounce stuff off each other. And look, Pete Carroll's very hands-on, so I guarantee you he had to approve the play call. And the other thing you got to understand is that was the first year. Steve Sarkisian was not at SC the year before.
Okay.
And Norm Chow was offensive coordinator. So then Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian conspired with each other. I know a coach who was sitting at the bar in Alabama at the Senior Bowl. This is 12 months before the Texas USC game. And Sarkisian and Kiffin are at the bar, and they're talking to each other about how they're going to go to Pete Carroll, and they're going to get him to fire Norm Chow and make Kiffin the offensive coordinator. And Sarkisian, I think, was quarterback coach, but he had another fake title. And then they would be like the offensive coordinator together. And Carroll liked it because he was getting tired of Norm Chow getting too much credit for the offense. So they pushed out Norm Chow, and this was their first year in charge with, the greatest offense in college football history, or whatever you want to call it. And then here we come to the signature moment, of the game, and this is their chance. And, I know you said you didn't care or it wasn't a big deal, but I do think it was a big deal that Reggie Bush was not on the field, because even if throwing him would have been an awesome play, I think. But the thing is, whether you use him or not, Lendale White had a great game too. Let's be clear about that. But whatever you do with Reggie Bush, if you just put him on the field and tell him to stand there, it affects the Texas defense, because Michael Huff, their star safety, he said after the game, when Bush was not on the field, that allowed him to move up to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, you can see it. He comes up.
The tackle.
Right.
He tackles Lendale White. So if you put Bush in there, Michael Huff's, 7 yards deep, and he may not get to Lendale White until he's past the, line of scrimmage, a first down marker. So I don't know how long it took Lane Kiffin to live that down. I don't know if he still has lived that down. I mean, USC fans are probably still mad at him for stuff as head coach, so they've forgotten more about that. But I remember, I talked to him about that play, or that play came up constantly in the years after that. So, I always tell people, I used to write this 10 years ago, if Norm Chow was there, they would have won the game. But, it was Sarkisian wanted to come back. He'd been with the Raiders, and Kiffin was dying to be the offensive coordinator. And Kiffin and Norm Chow did not even speak to each other. And Kiffin was the receivers coach, and Norm Chow was the offensive coordinator. I remember I had to go talk to Pete Carroll on signing day. It's like 8:30 at night, not about recruiting. I wanted to talk to him because I was going to write a story that they were pushing Norm Chow out. And I told him, well, Norm Chow told me he hasn't talked to Kiffin in the last 2 years. And then Carroll told me they haven't talked to each other for 4 years.
Oh, my God.
He didn't care that they didn't have a relationship. And
unbelievable.
But he did tell me, he used to wonder, like, when Chow decides to leave, all these recruits are going to start telling him, well, how am I going to, win a Heisman, or how am I going to be successful if Norm Chow is gone? So he didn't like all the credit. They just won 2 Heismans, or a Heisman, Carson Palmer won, and then Matt Leinart won. And he got tired of this idea that Norm Chow was the quarterback guru and that he was getting publicity. So he wasn't unhappy. Norm Chow was older, and Lane Kiffin and Sarkisian were young, and they knew how to kind of kiss butt. And Carroll liked guys like that. They used to play, after practice they'd get footballs, and they'd play like a game of golf out on the football field, trying to hit trash cans or the goal post or things like that. And one time I remember they gave Chow a ball after practice to play, and he just threw it down on the ground and walked away. So he wasn't like one of the pros, I guess you would say, nowadays. But
right.
So Carroll was happy to get rid of him. So unfortunately for the program, because I think if I thought they would beat Texas with Norm Chow, and then I think they might have won the national championship the following year if they had kept Norm Chow. So they really cost them. Even ego played a huge role in things that happened for the worse at the time.
Again, this is just a philosophy thing, in life. This is just something, just personal for me. I just believe that when you are going to go for it, whatever it might be, if you are going to ask some pretty girl out that you have a crush on, you don't limp in. When you're going on 4th and 1 with a national title on the line, with a season on the line, you don't run the ball. You do it big. You take your shot. When you're going to take your shot, you take your shot big, and you miss big or you hit big. There's no in between. There's no gaining 2 yards on 4th and 1. There's touchdown on a play that they weren't expecting because we went play action and Jarrett or whoever is wide open and we score and it's grandiose and we win. You do it. You grab those moments in life by the balls. And I know it's hard to hear that from someone that spends most of his time holed up at his place watching life go by. But it is something that I've learned from, the observations of watching other. You see something, you want it, you go after it big. USC didn't do that in that situation, and it cost them the game. And ultimately, Scott, that Texas team wins its 2 biggest games of the year, the road trip at Ohio State and the USC game in the Rose Bowl, 2 biggest wins of the year, not because of what they did right, but because of what the other team did wrong. Ohio State kicked nothing but field goals. They went up and down the fucking field on Texas. They kicked nothing but field goals in that game. They had a touchdown pass to Ryan Hamby, their tight end, that for some reason he decided to box with the ball in the end zone. He beats it. He's wide open in the end zone, beats it up, spikes it up into the air, brings it down, and then ultimately drops it. He's standing all alone. It would have been a touchdown that Ohio State wins the game with. And then they open the door for Vince Young to do his magic. And it's the same thing here with USC. They had a chance to put that baby away with that play. They didn't do it. It opened the door for Vince Young. And once again, Texas wins because the other guy couldn't put away the game. And that's how you have it. And so, I don't know. This late narrative or this narrative after the game or since the game that it's the greatest college game of all time, because I was there on the field seeing it, I'll play along, but to a degree, I don't think it's the greatest game of all time. I thought it had a lot of errors. I thought it had a lot of bad calls. Obviously that play where Vince Young's knee was down in the first half, that, they couldn't even use replay right in that game. It's just, to me, it's not the best game of all time. But, it is what it is. I get it. It's a high-stakes game that was, very exciting and came down to a wild finish.
Well, it was a great game. I don't know. Who knows what the greatest game is in anything. But I think it was a great game. The one thing I did mention last week was I thought that I felt more electricity, as loud as it was there and exciting, and everything's on the line. Mm-hmm. I thought there was more electricity at Notre Dame, USC that same season. But that was because there were 90,000 Notre Dame fans, and they're all screaming.
Right.
They're all agreeing with each other, rooting against USC. And a lot of them ran on the field because they thought the game was over.
Yeah, that's the Bush push game.
Yeah, so that game is the only game I've ever covered where I've been on the field, and I felt, I don't know how to explain it, like a wave of sound or something just hit me. It almost moved me. I felt my body move from it, and I've never experienced that before.
Yes, I know what you're saying. Like I said, jet engine, it felt like a vibration in my stomach and chest, and nowadays it would trigger a major panic attack. I left that game, though, Scott, that Rose Bowl, I left that game saying to myself, well, it was good and it was fun, but, to me, the CIF championship games I covered are just as thrilling. They just only had less fans. And I still feel that way to a degree. I know it's obviously a CIF championship game is not the same weight as a Rose Bowl with a national title on the line. And needless to say, 5,000 fans does not compare to 105, 107,000. But I got those same feelings, okay? Boy, it was an experience. And after the game, I'm trying to do post-game interviews. I'm doing a Texas sidebar, by the way. I'm trying to do post-game interviews. What's that?
I was going to ask you what your sidebar was.
Yeah, it was a Texas sidebar. It was about I can't even really remember. It was like something about like how they I think that, the last two touchdowns, how they just kind of let Vince Young, do his thing and it worked again, that kind of thing. And whether they were taking advantage of a tired SC defense that was just kind of all, and SC was, they were out of gas in the second half of that fourth quarter. Anyways, I'm trying to do interviews, and I'm a big guy. I almost trip and fall down because the field's so crowded, and I turn around, and there's like this little 4'6" Texas cheerleader. I almost fell over her. She's so small, and she's laughing at me. And I was pissed. I'm fucking fuming, Scott, after the game because I've already lost my ass betting the bowl season. And now I just lost 6 or 7 teasers, money that I didn't have at the time. And I just lost every one of them, when I thought heading down to the field, we're up 12 or I'm up 12. I'm thinking heading down to the field, I'm going to cash these things. I'm going to cash my bets. I'm going to, this is going to be, amazing. I'm going to be on the field for a national championship coronation. Instead, it all turns around. I lose my bets. I'm pissed off. I don't feel like riding. I don't even want to be there. All these Texas people are crying and hugging each other and smiling and all this. I'm irate. And I don't want to fucking be there. And I almost fall over a cheerleader. And I remember I said to her, I'll admit it, after that, I said to her, I said, you think it's fucking funny? Like that. And she just like looked at me and like, walked away. Oh man, I don't know. You want unique perspective, everyone. There's part of it. Okay, don't ask if you don't want it.
I'm thinking of it of sports editors having to think. I hope my writer wins his bet so that he's in a good mood after the game to write the story.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Scott, I don't know. I mean, you've been around more downtown press boxes than I have, obviously. Are the majority of these, because I know all sports writers think they know everything. So are the majority of these guys bettors or are they not? Because on the other side, a lot of sports writers are misers and, they wouldn't bet anything because they couldn't handle a $10 loss and this and that, and they don't make very much money on their jobs. By your vibe, I mean, are sports writers by and large bettors or not?
No. I don't think
no.
So. I mean,
yeah, I know, like your boy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know who you're going to mention now.
Yeah, your boy Tom Hofarth.
Oh, I don't think he's a bettor.
No, he's not a bettor. In fact, he's like anti-betting. He likes to like, it seems like call out people, who do bet, like one of those guys, On that note, Scott, and for everybody here, I will tell you guys something, and I'm not saying this is Hofarth, or guys like him, per se, but I'm just saying this about people in general. Sometimes people who are afraid to take risks themselves take comfort in seeing risk takers fail. Okay? So they see it as some sort of proof that staying in the safety of the middle of the pack is the correct choice. Like, Aram lost all his teasers and this and that, and, serves him right, and this is why I'm smart, because I don't do shit like that, and I stay in the middle of the pack. But you're never going to get out of the middle of the pack if you don't take risks. So, nonetheless,
well, the guy I went down to the field with a friend. He was writing a column. I don't think he would want me to identify him, but he's a big bettor, and he had bet on the game.
Okay,
but he had bet on Texas, so I think he was probably happy.
Okay.
But
so it was like wrong side, right result.
You should have been a sports writer, I think, in the 50s or 60s, because
no, I should have been a sports writer in Vegas, Scott. But
there were writers who used to cover SC in the late 50s, early 60s, and there was one in particular. I think he worked for the Times. He would go on the road trip with USC, and then no one would see him the whole weekend because he would get drunk, and he didn't even go to the game. And then either some of the other writers or the sports information director would write a story, and they would send it to the paper under his name, and then he'd show up like Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
But
well,
and then
you sure you're not describing Doug Krikorian here, our boy Doug Krikorian?
If I was, I would name him.
Okay.
I'm just trying to protect the dead at this point. But
okay, fair enough.
There was a famous writer, Raven Dyer, columnist, and I think he was working for the LA Times, and USC used to pay for his suite on the road, not a regular room, a suite. And I remember hearing from people at SC that he would ask them to go find him women on road trips and stuff like that. So it was a different era, and they were all gambling, I'm sure, too.
Sure. And now, Scott,
he would have fit in better those days.
Maybe, but I don't know. And I'm starting to wonder about these days because now everybody wants, the sports betting angle because sports betting's not taboo anymore. And it's way out there. And, I'll tell you, when Alabama beat Texas in the national title game, 2009 or 10, it was 10 because this is just a few days before I left Fox. I was working at Fox. I'm actually the guy working the game as far as our live coverage on the website, meaning live coverage is I'm changing the headlines to say, Texas, Alabama entering fourth quarter, tied ahead, that kind of thing, changing out the art, the photos from the game to reflect the latest things, that type of thing. I'm doing that night. That was a Monday night. And I'm also got a bunch of bets ending to Alabama, and I'm about to win this pool run by a guy, late Hall of Fame boxing sports writer named Royce Fior. I don't know if you know who he is, out of Las Vegas for the Review Journal. He would run a bowl pool every year. Guys like Tim Kawakami, Mike Tyson was in it, Don King was in it. I don't know if I'm outing people here, but so be it. He had just like a who's who of people in there, and somehow I had gotten in this pool. And nonetheless, with an Alabama win and cover, I'm about to, finish in a three-way tie for the win here. These are all bowl season bets against the spread, this pool. It's all against the spread. So it's not easy. It's not just straight up. And my editor at Fox, the guy in charge, calls me into his office because, we're somewhat loud out there in the newsroom cheering and watching the game. I've got money on it. Another guy does. And he tells me, it just blows my mind because it's just how we come. He says, hey, dude, he calls me in, come in the office real quick. So, because his office is shielded kind of from the newsroom, but he can hear what's going on. He says to me, hey, dude, I don't want my newsroom floor to become a casino, okay? So tone it down. Now, you think about that compared to now today where they are clamoring for sports betting content and sports betting angles, and it just tells you all you need to know about these things. But nonetheless, I would not recommend betting a game or an event and going and covering it because it was awful having to write that cider after I had just lost my ass, especially with money I didn't have. And it happened to me also in the 2003 Breeders' Cup. I covered that, and I ended up having to write like 3 stories about it. And, you cover the Breeders' Cup, everyone in that press box is betting, and by the end of the day, I'm busted, okay? And I'm pissed off that I'm busted, and I just want to go to Carl's Jr. and go home. No, you got 3 stories you got to write. You're going to be up in the Santa Anita press box till 7, 8 o'clock. I never again. I said, you know what? I'm going to stick to covering high schools because it ruins these events for me to have to actually write about them after I see them. So forget it. That was that.
Did the guy that I have a question. Did the guy that you told me a couple days ago never did any work at Fox? Was he in the pool too?
No, he was not in that pool. I was the only guy at Fox who was in the pool.
Okay.
No, he was not in that pool, but I think he was in the office that night, just sitting in the corner doing nothing. As usual.
Let me tell you one more Dyer story before I forget. Just to show you that he's famous also because he got drunk on the road one night, and he went up into the hotel room of Bo Belinsky, the Angel pitcher, and he tried to throw a punch at Bo Belinsky, and Bo Belinsky knocked him out. And then the Angels ended up sending Bo Belinsky to the minors for that incident, but he was one of their great pitchers in history. But it just different era in those days. You could get away with stuff. But let me I want to say something about the game. I talked to Oscar Lua a couple years ago.
Okay.
He was the middle linebacker, and he was still mad. He's a great guy. I like talking to him. He was still mad talking to me about the game because he thought he had a pretty good game, and they were pulling him off the field in those last couple drives, and I think they might have been putting one of the Tings on the field in place of him, and he always felt like well, if I was on the field, I could have tackled Vince Young on one of his scrambles instead of these other guys that were too small or,
Right.
couldn't. So, and I don't remember, right after the game, any second guessing by any players or anything like that, but he still was kind of upset about that he didn't get to play, in those key plays at the end of the game, which I thought was interesting. And then I think we need to talk about, I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, but a big part of the game, too, was, after the touchdown, which everybody thinks, the game ended right there, where SC made a critical error calling a timeout after Texas was going to go for 2.
Right. Right.
They obviously were going to go for 2 because they were up 1, so there's no point in kicking an extra point. But Pete Carroll, after Texas scored the touchdown, Pete Carroll was already talking to Sarkisian and the offensive players. He wanted to get ready to talk about what they were going to do. So you see on the replay they showed last week, SC has I think 6 DBs in the game, and they're standing around. They're all in the end zone, and it's like a 2-point play. So Jethro Franklin, the defensive line coach, he saw what was going on, and he was like, we can't have this. So he calls the timeout, and that was their last timeout. So Texas ended up getting the 2 points anyways, but then SC gets the ball back, and they have no timeouts, and they had one. So you can see Carroll's not happy that they called the timeout. And then they throw the ball to Reggie Bush,
Yeah.
and he's got a wide open field.
Yep.
But he can't go all the way down the field because he has to get out of bounds to stop the clock.
Right.
So then the next play after that, they could have kicked a field goal.
Yeah, they were contemplating it, right?
Yeah, they were too far away, I think. But if they'd had that timeout, they could have run another play or something. Or he could have just gone down the field another 15 yards, I think. So that timeout, burning that timeout, really hurt them there in that situation because they could have easily forced the game to overtime.
Scott, what's funny about the 2-point conversion is it didn't really matter that much anyways. You're either going to be down 1 or you're going to be down 3.
Right. And you knew they knew that Texas was going to go for 2 no matter what. So they should have just anticipated that. And, like you said, they didn't need to call the timeout because it didn't matter. But that influenced the game. So.
Yeah, and Scott, earlier in the game, as I'm watching this replay in last week's ESPN showing of it, there's a play where Texas has the ball, and I don't know if it's towards the, end of the third quarter or something. They run the ball. They get a first down. I forget what it was. The referees don't stop the clock. The guy went out of bounds or something. They don't stop the clock. And Keith Jackson even mentions it. They're just letting the clock run. They should have stopped it. And this is long before it's, a close last-second game. And he just kind of says something to Fouts like, this is not like the best game for these officials. They're just letting the clock run here. There was a good 13, 14 seconds that could have still been on the game clock at that time. And you don't know that it's going to come back and be so big, but, it was.
Yeah, you're right. And you combine that with the Vince Young knee on the ground and the replay snap. It wasn't a good game.
That's why, whatever. I'm telling you. I'll tell you what, Scott. The year before his Rose Bowl, Texas against Michigan, I can make an argument that pound for pound it was just as good of a game. Vince Young had a miracle, another amazing, late performance and won the game for Texas. That was just as good a game. for my money, Penn State, USC recently in the Rose Bowl. Another fantastic game. You can go on and on. I mean, other Rose Bowls since then, other national title games since then, just as good pound for pound. But hey, I get it. This was a special moment that a lot of people will never forget in college football. Now, while we still have a little bit of time here, we got to get into the Ting era, the Ting brothers era. Now, we don't have a ton of time, Scott, but you actually did some reporting on this. Now, just to give people background, as far as I could tell, Ting brothers came from a pretty affluent area of the Bay Area up north, San Francisco Bay Area. And they went to high school across the bay from where they actually lived at a high school named James Logan High School. And, they had some accolades. I'm not sure it was SC level. So like you said, there must have been, some way of getting them in. Like you said, you were told by Carol, they're just kind of to round out the roster. And yet somehow they found themselves on the field at such critical times in USC history. Unbelievable. But this Ting brothers era didn't end, magically by any stretch. And I think that was a story that you broke.
Yes. I remember I had to drive to SC one day, and I ended up, this because as a writer, sports writer, a lot of times your job is just sitting around waiting to talk to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to wait like an hour to talk to Pete Carroll because I think it was in I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look. Might have been in January or February, off season, not a lot going on. But I had heard that one of them had tested positive for steroids. So I had to wait for him to get a comment from him and some confirmation or whatever. And that's the great thing about covering Pete Carroll, though, is you tell him, hey, I heard this Ting tested positive for steroids, and he confirms it. He doesn't try to, nowadays the coach at SC would say he has no comment. But,
probably wanted him out of there.
The NCAA, I don't know if they still do it this way, but back then they would random test guys after bowl games.
Right.
So I think they tested one of the Tings, so that, I think, made him ineligible. And then I think the other one didn't get tested, but he just stopped playing at the same time. So that just basically ended their careers right there.
Any idea what's up with them now? I mean, spiky hair.
I know, not now. I know a few years after the Rose Bowl, they were trying to be models. I remember they were doing some type of modeling work.
Of course. They're rich kids, Scott.
But the dad got, he had to testify, I think, in the Barry Bonds trial. He was Barry Bonds' doctor, I think.
Balco, right?
Yeah, he became pretty notorious afterwards, a few years later. And he even had a restraining order, I think, filed against him by a doctor up north who accused him of, choking him or doing something to him. So
I quit.
He was in the news for, quite a few things after the boys had stopped playing. And
amazing.
Everybody remembers them, though, because they were twins. And,
yeah.
They weren't. I remember one of them. It's hard to, when there's twins, it's always hard to remember which one. But they did a prank at practice one day. They had Lendale White, who had a volatile personality, so that's why the prank was effective. But they made him, during practice, he left the field, and he went and climbed up on the roof of this 4-story building next to the practice field. So he gets up on the roof, and he just starts screaming and shouting and doing all this, he's upset about something. And he was so far away I couldn't hear exactly what he was saying. but they made it. I don't know if you remember this. You might not, but they made it look like he jumped off the building.
Oh, I think I remember this. Yeah.
Killed himself. So, and the thing I remember, like, I'm watching it, and when they tried to make it look like he jumped, I didn't buy it. But I remember looking at the players, and one of the Ting brothers, like, he dropped to the ground, and he thought it was real, and he was just devastated. And, the thing is, like, there's no way today. So I can't imagine something like that getting pulled off today. But with Pete Carroll, he could do a lot of things. And then the first year Carroll was there, this is a pretty funny story. They're playing UCLA that week. So Carroll has one of the guys on the staff. There's another building adjacent to the football practice field that's about 9 stories high, 8 or 9 stories high. He has one of the guys on staff go up on the roof with a mannequin, and he tells the team there's a guy, a spy from UCLA, up on the roof. So they're all looking up at the roof, and the guy's wrestling the mannequin, and he takes the mannequin and he throws it off the roof of the building, like he threw the guy off the roof.
Oh my God!
Now, here's the funny part, which was potentially tragic. He just throws this mannequin off the roof, and he tells me afterwards he didn't look or anything. He just threw it, and that when he looked over the edge, that mannequin almost hit the student who was walking on the sidewalk.
Oh.
So imagine if that could have killed the person.
Oh God!
8
Wow.
Story drops, but that's just kind of the way things happened in the Pete Carroll era. Like they just did stuff. And
they had O.J. Simpson come, visit the team.
I was there.
Snoop Dogg,
I spent 30
ridiculous.
minutes interviewing him.
What a
but
jeez.
Will Ferrell came to practice one day, and he had like this kind of like, I don't know if it was a motor racing outfit on or something, and he got up on a hydraulic lift on the street outside the practice field. So there's a wood fence, so you can't see the street. And the players didn't know they put like a big air mattress or pit there. So Will Ferrell jumped from the lift down onto the inflatable mattress, but the players thought he just jumped down the street from the hydraulic lift. So
God.
They used to pull all kinds of crazy stuff in those days, but that it was a very loose program, and maybe that's one of the reasons they were successful.
I was going to say, it worked in terms of wins. Listen, Scott, the safety grouping back then, this will be the last thing I say before we get out of here. Safety grouping for that team, Kevin Ellison, Chase McWhorter, Darnell Bing, Will Harris, Scott Ware, Justin Hart, Josh Pinkard, and wait for it, Brandon Ting, Ryan Ting. Unbelievable that they are on the field at critical times in a national title.
Well, you know
game.
what? I was watching. I would probably have to watch it again, but in that last series down in the end zone, Kevin Thomas makes 2 great plays, breaking up the passes, and he's a freshman at the time. So, and they had Darnell Bing, Scott Ware, like you said.
Yeah, I just read the safeties. Yeah, you're talking the corners with Kevin Thomas.
Right, but I mean the Kings were essentially playing corner in the defense of the game. But I'd have to go back and see do they really need them on the field? Because they might have, but Kevin Thomas made some great plays Scott Ware was a really good safety. Darnell Bing was a good safety. Josh Pinkard was a good player. So they had some guys. A lot of people like to blame. Actually, a lot of people still blame Frosty Rucker on that last run by Vince Young.
Because he went too far upfield and then lost contain and had to try and come back down and get him and couldn't. I know,
But you can blame Winston Justice on the 4th and 1 with Wendell Light too, because he didn't block the guy.
Yeah.
But let me just. I know we're going to wrap up. The other thing I remember most. Well, two things. One, I don't think anyone else saw it at the time because I went in the locker room pretty early. Lane Kiffin was in tears in the locker room, and he was trying to kind of hide from the media. But that's the only time I've really seen him in tears. But the next day, I go to Heritage Hall because Carol's going to do like a post-game press conference at Heritage Hall. And I'm just thinking, this guy's going to be devastated. Like, this is going to be really a kind of a down press conference. And the thing was, he was actually pretty good in the press conference. And then I thought, he's going to go home. He's not going to, because the campus is pretty much dead because it's January, 3rd, 4th. I don't remember when the game was. But
4th.
Yeah, so school's on Christmas break, so there's no one there. There's no reason for him to stay there. But he ends up staying in his office for I don't know, at least 4 or 5 more hours, and he's on the phone, he's calling other coaches about, coming to SC, trying to recruit assistant coaches. He's walking around there he used to like to walk around with a baseball bat in his hand while he was on the phone because he's kind of a hyper guy and can't sit still. And I just remember marveling, this guy's working the phones all night, and he just lost to Texas the night before.
Yeah.
Probably didn't get any sleep that night because they always plan big parties at the golf course after the Rose Bowl. And then this party didn't really have much going for it because they lost the game. So people either didn't go or they went and left quickly. But
show must go on.
He just never stopped. So and he was really positive, oh no, I'm getting ready for next year, and that's just the way he was. And
yeah. Meanwhile,
wasn't anybody.
Meanwhile, Aram's scrambling to pay the bookie. Thank you.
Yeah, you're mad. You're mad on the field because you lost your bet, and he's shaking off the loss that until the Super Bowl years later would be his worst loss.
Yeah. Another botched play in a big moment. Whatever.
Well, you can't accuse him of being conservative on that play, right?
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. Everyone's saying you should have given it to beast mode, and look, different situation though. That's down on the goal line, but is what it is, Scott. All right, we've gone long enough. Scott, I appreciate it. I'm going to think of other things that we can flash back on and do future pods about while we wait out this quarantine and tragic COVID-19 situation.
Well, I'm just glad you avoided a tragedy with that cheerleader.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm sure she still thinks about me. All right, my man. We'll be in contact.
All right, I loved it. I loved rekindling all these memories from.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm going to think of other moments that we should flash back on and give unique perspectives on, and I think that'll be good for this time when people don't have much current stuff to go on. So I think it'll work out.
Let's do one next week.
Absolutely. You got it. Thank you, Scott.
Take care.
That was Scott Wolf, everybody, the Wolf of Figueroa Street. You can follow him on Twitter at InsideUSC. You can go to his website, InsideUSC.blog. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, these are terrible times, and hopefully we just keep toughing through it, avoid tragedy ourselves, and let this thing pass, and move on and create new memories, whenever that might be. So I thank you for listening, and we will be back with you soon.